But today, we're here to talk about one of the lesser-known provisions of the law, one that has the potential to provide even greater relief to millions of Americans and fuel our economic recovery. I was proud to author the Student Loan Tax Relief Act and fought hard alongside with the Senator Elizabeth Warren to include it in the American Rescue Plan. And as I said, we had a great champion in Bill Pascrell in the House. Because of its passage and now signed into law, borrowers who qualify for debt forgiveness are now protected from huge surprise tax bills. Until now, most forgiven student debt was considered income. Just imagine qualifying to have $30,000 in student debt forgiven and then having the IRS come after you for nearly $7,000 in owed taxes. It made no sense. And it makes even less sense in the middle of a pandemic when so many are hurting. Thanks to the American Rescue Plan, forgiven student debt will now be tax-free until 2026, saving the average borrower about $2,200 in taxes for every $10,000 of forgiven student loans. Even better, by passing this bill, Democrats have set the stage for President Biden to take bold action to free millions of Americans from crushing student loan debt and jumpstart our economic recovery. Today we're calling on President Biden to use his authority to forgive up to $50,000 in student loan debt. For many Americans, and especially people of color, crippling student loan debt has turned the dream of a college education into a financial nightmare that haunts them for decades. According to Lending Tree, here in New Jersey, there are an estimated 1.3 million borrowers holding $48.8 billion in public and private student loan debt with an average balance of more than $33,000. Nationwide, 40 million people owe $1.6 trillion in student loans, and for many, it's simply insurmountable. The pandemic may have exacerbated this crisis, but it has been decades in the making. For far too long, incomes have failed to keep pace with the soaring costs not just of education, but also health care, housing, child care, and other basic living expenses. When you are barely keeping your head above water, it is a hell of a lot harder to make a dent in your student loan principal. Meanwhile, federal investments in college affordability have failed to keep pace with rising tuition bills. You know, before I was the highest-ranking Latino in the United States Congress, I was a poor kid from Union City, the first in my family to go to college. When I graduated from St. Peter's University in 1976, a Pell Grant covered about 79% of the annual cost of attending a four-year college. But these days, Pell Grants cover just about 29% of low-income students' college costs. That's a huge difference, 50% difference. We're not investing the way we used to in our young people. And the nation needs, in order to be competitive globally and to continue to lead the world and its economy, among the best and the brightest that we have ever had. So it's no surprise that these days getting a higher education means getting buried by higher and higher mountains of student loan debt. Today, more than 9 million borrowers are in default. And just like any crisis, student debt disproportionately impacts minority communities. Within 6 years of starting college, 32% of African American borrowers and 20% of Latino borrowers defaulted on their loans, compared to just 13% of their white counterparts. Forgiving student debt would free millions of Americans from a financial burden that is holding them back. Consider this. Here in New Jersey, the average student loan bill is $310 a month, and for many borrowers, it's even more. I'm talking about $400 or $500 a month on top of all their other bills. Just imagine what citizens could do if some or all of that debt was forgiven. Maybe it's finally buying your first home. Maybe it's a car that you need to be able to get to work. Maybe it's currently thinking about what you're doing in your life and starting your own small business. Maybe it's saying yes to your spouse or partner. Let's have a baby because we can afford a family now. So here's the bottom line. Forgiving student loan debt will unleash a new wave of consumer spending throughout our economy. And the good news is that President Biden does not need Congress to do it. Section 432A of the Higher Education Act of 1965 already gives him the authority to cancel student debt. And with the American Rescue Plan now the law of the land, we no longer have to worry about slamming borrowers with surprise taxes on their forgiven debt. I believe President Biden wants to be a bold, transformative president, and he literally has the power to transform the lives of millions of Americans drowning in student debt, especially in poor, low-income, and minority communities. He should use it. And we are continuing to press him in the days and months ahead. That's why the provision that we authored into law is a huge incentive, not only a relief, not to get hit with huge tax bills when you have debt forgiven, but also ultimately to incentivize the president to do this. I'm thrilled to see that the president has asked the Secretary of Education to give him a memo as it relates to the authorities that he has. We believe he has those authorities, and it is my hope that the Secretary of Education will advise him so.